What's going on, YouTube? Welcome. So, welcome back to another episode of A Late Night at Dames. And this evening, we're going to have a conversation about whether or not it's more important for you to get the grade or for you to understand the concept. And so, if you like conversations like this, make sure you hit that like button so that way we can show this to more people, and also hit the subscribe button so you can catch my latest videos. So, what do I mean by getting the grade or understanding the concept? Well, there was one thing that I learned in school was that the nerd wasn't really the best student. It was a phenomenon that I noticed over the years. It was the nerd was not the best student, and it was just simply that the nerd knew how to go to school, but the nerd didn't know how to apply themselves. And what does that mean? So that means like have you ever seen, I'm sure you have, you've seen a PE coach with a beer belly, and you've seen the girl who can dance really well and be pretty and friendly, but she's not that smart. You see what I'm saying? So what happens here is that there is an application that's not really needed as much as the education. So for your PE coach with a beer belly, it was more beneficial for him to understand physical education than to apply physical education. You see what happened there? So it was easier for him to get a job, to maybe go to school and learn the skills to get that job, and to teach others than it was to discipline and apply it for himself and maintain it to a point where it's almost an example, right? And so when you're seeing something like that in front of you, it doesn't really click until you try to judge it or try to take part in it. And what I mean by that is like if you yourself are trying to get fit and you're trying to get muscular and faster, that's when you're going to start to consider who has the understanding over who has the grades. It doesn't really click if you're just like taking a PE class in the 8th grade, like you don't really care, right? And so if we go back to my other example of the girl who's like really pretty and popular, but she's not that smart, for her it didn't really matter to know everything, to get everything, to understand everything. It really mattered more to get the results. So if people liked you because you're pretty, that's easier to manage than trying to make sure this person likes you because you understand everything is a part of, the things that they enjoy about, themselves. So it's probably more of a benefit for you to find a sweet spot between, but you have to be able to identify which situation calls for what kind of strategy or approach. So let's say you're a musician, right? And you need to practice for a show or something like that, or you have a gig coming up. Would it be better for you to understand what's going to happen at the gig, who's going to be at the gig, the venue, and which street it's on, and what holidays are surrounding the date and things like that, over the music that you're playing, like the correct notes and things like that, which is more important? And that's where I was suggesting that you want to find a balance. You want to be able to just know your music to a point to where you can now worry about the auxiliary things. But if you had to choose which one is more important, understanding your role as a musician or understanding everything that's around your role, and what do you do when you figure that out? When you figure out which more important? And so for me in my career, it was kind of interesting because I would be, let's say, in college, going to practice and joining different bands and playing with different musicians, and I found that the priorities were different from each individual. Each individual had something different going on in their life that maybe dictated why they were here in this room, why they chose the certain instrument, all kinds of different things affected it, right? And so it got to the point where I started thinking like, well, then what's the point of, let's say, being a master of the trumpet if I want to, be one of the greatest musicians in the world? Let's just make up a goal, right? Because the greatest musician of the world isn't just a master of trumpet. They would be a master of audio engineering. They would be a master of songwriting. They would be a master of conducting. They would probably know more than the English language. They would know multiple languages. So then you start to really think and sit back. Well, this guy right here that I'm talking to, or this person, this teacher I'm getting lessons from, they only really know probably about like a single digit percentage of the amount of information that's out there. I could probably glean what I can from them, but I need to get more, right? And so this is where it's not as important to get the grade. It's more important to apply yourself and really figure out what all you can get from the knowledge you're getting or receiving from people. So you could find ways to master the trumpet But what would that do for you? What does that get you? That just gets you the mastery of trumpet. That's it. But if you can take the skills it took for you to maybe the relationship you built with your teacher, there's social skills in that that allow you to, translate that into other things throughout your career. And then also there's networking opportunities. When you are learning things like an instrument, there's other parts of learning an instrument that you can translate into other skills, like notation. You can learn how to notate a lot of the music you need to read to master trumpet. And then there's also the more mechanical side of it, where you can learn how to maintain, clean, take care, or repair trumpets and things like that. And that's just one more layer where you can go even deeper, where you can get into distribution and manufacturing of songs and music for different groups. Maybe you can make lessons for other trumpet players and things like that. And then again, going back to the physical side, you can get into the manufacturing of trumpets. Maybe there's a demand for brass. Maybe there's new ways to invent trumpets. There's so many ways you can like wrap your mind around. But if all you wanted to do was just be the best trumpet player, all that other stuff I said doesn't matter. You just need to make sure you can hit your B flats in tune. That's it. So there's really nothing else you need to be worrying about, because you just need that grade of mastery of trumpet, right? And so this is where a lot of musicians, especially the younger ones, are going to create kind of like a chasm between where they want to be and where they are, because I've met 50, 60, 70-year-old musicians, and it's like they have no willpower to learn outside of the thing that they're good at, which could be, guitar or trumpet or whatever it is. And it's not that they're, incapable. It's just that they're not willing. They don't really care to do so. And it would honestly take a lot more work, but it's work that they're just not willing to do. It's not that they can't do it. They're just not willing. So if this was helpful to you and you thought this was a great conversation, make sure you let me know in the comments, and we can make this a multi-part thing or explore it and have more conversations deeper in the comments. So let me know if you enjoyed this by hitting that like button. I will see you guys tomorrow night at a late night at Dames. But I'm out, y'all. Peace.